Have you ever experienced the moment when your heart completely stopped beating, only to wake up and realize the very family you sacrificed your entire life for was wishing you gone? I once died for 47 seconds on the operating table. When the doctors pulled me back to life, the first thing I did was send a message to my wife and son. Dad is being discharged today. My son coldly replied, "Call a taxi." My wife was even crueler. "Stay there longer. The house feels lighter without you." In that instant, I realized that a hospital bed wasn't yet my grave, but my own home had already become one. Before I continue with the full truth behind this shock, please subscribe to the channel and tell me where you are listening from in the comments. Your support is my greatest motivation to go on. My name is Harold Whitman, 69 years old, a retired construction engineer in Austin, Texas. After 4 decades of living in the white suburban house where I laid every single brick myself, I thought I knew the true value of family. But one January morning, all of that faith shattered with just a few cold lines of text. The monitor beeped steadily. Beep. Beep. White light stabbing through my eyelids. I struggled to open my eyes, throat dry as sand, chest weighed down as if by concrete. When I realized I was lying in the recovery room of Memorial Austin Hospital, the first feeling wasn't relief, it was confusion. I heard a gentle woman's voice. "Mr. Whitman, can you hear me?" That was Dr. Carter, a cardiologist. She leaned close, fingers on my wrist, counting the pulse. The surgery was successful. But you need to know, your heart stopped for 47 seconds. We brought you back 47 seconds. In that moment, I had truly left this world. And when I was pulled back, the first thing I did was reach for my phone and type in the family group chat. The doctor says I can be discharged earlier than expected. Who can come pick me up? I waited. My fingers trembled around the phone, eyes still heavy from anesthesia. The screen lit up. The first message was from Eric, my only son. "Call a taxi." I'm watching the basketball game. I read it 3 times, hoping I had misread. No, "How are you, Dad?" No, "Do you need anything?" Just indifference, as if speaking to a stranger. Seconds later, a second message appeared, this time from Linda, my wife of 45 years. "Staying in the hospital for another month is good. Without you, the house feels much better." I froze. They say the deepest wounds don't come from enemies, but from your own family. Lying on that bed, chest bound in white bandages, I understood that saying with painful clarity. I had sacrificed my entire life so they could live comfortably. And in the moment I needed them most, the answer was, "We don't need you." I turned toward the hospital window. Outside, the Texas sky was winter gray. No flowers, no visitors bringing cards or plants. Like the other patients nearby, my room was bare, cold. Nurse Jennifer, a young nurse, came in to change the IV. She glanced at the phone screen glowing with those messages, sympathy flickering in her eyes. "Looks like your family is very busy," she whispered. I forced a laugh. "Yes. So busy there's no room for me in their schedule." Jennifer didn't reply. She simply placed her warm hand on my shoulder for a few seconds. Sometimes the compassion of a stranger soothes more than any promise from family. That night, with the hallway lights reflecting through the glass, I lay awake thinking of the road I had walked. I remembered the late nights of overtime, bringing construction blueprints home, the desk lamp glowing on my tired face. I remembered the dreams of youth, a trip to Paris with Linda, a garage filled with restored classic cars. All postponed, sacrificed, buried, and now, after my heart stopped for 47 seconds, when everything should have changed, the truth became clearer than ever. In their eyes, I was only a wallet, a tool, nothing more. But I would not stop here. I would not accept being turned into a burden. And if you follow me through this journey, you'll see. That shock was not the end. It was only the beginning of a reckoning Linda and Eric could never have imagined. People often say youth is the time for dreams and experiments. For me, youth was spent on construction drawings, endless contracts, and bills to be paid. When you have a family to care for, private dreams turn into dry numbers on a paycheck. And slowly you convince yourself that sacrifice today will buy happiness tomorrow. I believed that for 40 years. I still remember clearly in 1985, when I turned 30, I stood before the most important choice of my life. I held in my hands a startup plan to open my own construction company, hire a few brothers with the same passion. All night I calculated profits, pictured a small office, the first projects, the sign with the Whitman name hanging at the door. But Linda was pregnant then, and the doctor said she needed rest, needed me to cover all expenses. I folded that dream, tucked it into a drawer, and applied to a large corporation. The salary wasn't high, but steady. I told myself a company can wait, but family cannot. In the 1990s, when Eric started at school, I tried to hold on to one small passion. I bought a 1967 Ford Mustang, dark blue, old but so beautiful that just starting the engine made my heart race. It was the only luxury I allowed myself. I spent Sunday mornings cleaning every detail, polishing every chrome line. To me, it wasn't just a car, but a symbol of freedom, of the youth I never had. But when Eric was about to enter college, Linda said bluntly, "Harold, we need money." What's the use of a car? Our son needs education." I stayed silent, handed over the keys. Watching that Mustang roll out of the garage felt like a piece of my life leaving with it. In 2003, we celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary. I secretly planned a surprise, a trip to Paris, the dream Linda had carried since her youth. I worked overtime for a whole year, skipped dinners at home, saved enough for 2 round-trip tickets, and a week in a hotel by the Seine. I even bought a French guidebook, marking little cafes in Montmartre. But when I presented the tickets, Linda cried, hugged me, then tore them. Eric had just been accepted to the University of Texas, and tuition cost 3 times what I had saved. I watched the pieces of paper fall to the floor, hearing Linda whisper, "Paris will always be there, but this chance for our son won't wait." And once again that fragile dream was buried. In the years after, I worked myself to exhaustion. Some days I stood at construction sites for 16 hours, came home with sweat and cement dust covering my shirt. I collapsed into the armchair and asked Linda, "When will I get to rest?" She gave a thin smile. "When Eric succeeds, we'll have time for ourselves." I believed her words like a promise. Then in 2010, Eric was 24, full of ambition. He came home with a business plan, launching a mobile game company. His eyes shone as he spoke of millions of dollars, of changing his life. Listening to him for a moment, I saw myself in 1985, once clutching my own startup plan, dreaming the same dream. The only difference was that I gave mine up. This time I didn't want my son to give up. He needed capital. I signed the mortgage papers, pulled $75,000 from the house, and gave it to him. Eric hugged me. "I'll pay you back double. Trust me, Dad." 6 months later, the company collapsed. I had to work 3 more years to slowly pay off the debt. Each sacrifice was piled like bricks in a wall. The Mustang was gone. Paris turned to scraps of paper. The house was nearly lost to the bank. And I, Harold Whitman, kept telling myself it was all for love, for family. I thought Linda and Eric understood that. I thought one day they would look back and see what I had given up. But lying on that hospital bed, reading Call a Taxi, I'm watching basketball, and stay in the hospital longer, it's better. The entire past suddenly became a cold wall. A wall I spent my whole life building, but one without a single door leading to gratitude. Perhaps the bitterest truth was not that my heart stopped for 47 seconds. The bitterest truth was that for 40 years I had lived like a debtor. borrowing from my own strength to pay for the dreams of others, and never once did anyone think of paying it back. And at that very moment, when I realized all the sacrifices were meaningless, a new thought flashed in me. If this entire life is just a chain of payments for ingratitude, then perhaps it is time I stopped paying. 3 days after I was told to prepare for discharge, Dr. Carter knocked on the door carrying a thick stack of documents. "Mr. Whitman," she said, calm but firm, "before you go home, you need to attend a post-operative counseling session. We will explain how to take your medications, your diet plan, warning signs to watch for, and your follow-up schedule. It's best to have a family member with you to take notes and support you." I nodded, but a hesitation flickered inside. Family member? That phrase suddenly felt foreign. Since the moment I woke up after surgery, Linda and Eric had not appeared at my bedside even once. I remembered the 2 messages that day. "Call a taxi," and "Without you, the house is more comfortable." Physical wounds can be stitched, but those words carved into the heart have no medicine. Even so, I still wanted to try once more. Maybe, hearing the doctor's clear request, they would change. Maybe somewhere in them there was still a minimal sense of responsibility. I opened my phone and typed a brief message in the family group. "The doctor requires a family member to attend the post-operative counseling session on Friday at 10 a.m. Who can go with Dad?" I set the phone down and waited. In my mind, a faint hope still flickered, like a weak flashlight in a dark tunnel. 10 minutes later, the first notification sounded. "Eric. Friday, I have an important meeting with a client. Can't skip it. Just record the session and send it to me after." "Record it." I let out a bitter laugh. The instructions about his father's life reduced to skimming an audio file, like background music to fast forward through. 20 minutes later, Linda replied as well. "Harold, I have a fundraising gala with my friends on Friday. I accepted long ago, and canceling at the last minute would be embarrassing. Just go with a nurse. They're much more professional than I am." I put the phone down and looked out the window. The Texas morning was full of sun, but the rooms seemed to darken. I wasn't asking for devotion or sacrifice. I only needed one of them to be there, to listen to a few words from the doctor, to jot down a few notes. Yet both chose their private reasons, treating my survival as a bothersome detail intruding on their schedules. On Friday, I sat in a small counseling room, cold white neon pooling over the prescription sheets. Dr. Carter explained carefully which pills to take after breakfast, which before bed, which signs required calling emergency immediately, how to control my diet to ease the heart's burden. I nodded, listening while taking notes in the small notebook I carried. Beside me, the chair marked family member remained empty. Sometimes silence carries a weight more crushing than scolding. Staring at that empty chair, I felt no hope left, only stark aloneness. In my head appeared Linda, beaming in an evening gown, raising a glass with friends at the gala. Eric, fingers on the keyboard, headset on, arguing animatedly with a client on Zoom. 2 lively, noisy worlds, and not a single place for me. When the session ended, Dr. Carter set her hand on my shoulder gently. "Mr. Whitman, the most important thing in recovery isn't only medication, it's emotional support from family." I gave a thin smile, folding the papers. "Doctor, rest assured." I've learned that lesson well. That morning, walking back to my room, I felt as if I had stepped through a doorway. No more illusions, no more expectations. The final test had confirmed it. To Linda and Eric, I was merely an inconvenient obligation, a burden to be kept at arm's length, and precisely in knowing that for certain I felt more resolute than ever. The day I left the hospital, Austin's sky was bright and cold, silver-gray clouds drifting above. A taxi took me back to the familiar street, where the White House with the green-tiled roof had been mine for more than 40 years. On paper, it was a home, the fruit of a lifetime of labor. But as the car turned into the driveway, my heart grew heavy, with no trace of anticipation. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air hit my face, stale fast food, the tang of leftover alcohol from parties, and clutter everywhere. Linda's shoes lay tossed by the entrance, her purse sprawled open on the sofa. On the living room coffee table, empty beer cans and pizza boxes were piled up. The armchair where I used to read had become a stand for Eric's game console, cables draped messily across the room. I walked slowly through each room, my heart tightening not from the incision but from the raw truth. While I lay in a hospital bed, they lived here like they were on vacation. There was no sign they worried about me or missed me. On the contrary, every corner had been turned into their private playground. But the real shock waited in my study, the most sacred room, the small part I kept for myself. I pushed the door open, my heart clenched. Construction drawings I had carefully stored were shoved askew and coated in dust. On the desk, the box of important documents was pushed aside, replaced by Linda's craft supplies. The shelves where I used to organize technical files and family keepsakes were crammed with old computers and broken parts Eric had dumped there. There was no trace that this had ever been my space. I dropped into the swivel chair, my eyes fixing on the empty spot on the glass shelf above. There, for years, I had kept a vintage Rolex, my father's keepsake. He left it to me when he passed, with a reminder. This is not just a watch. It is a warning that your time is worth more than gold. Never let anyone take it from you for nothing. The little box was empty. The Rolex was gone. I opened drawers, rifled through folders, hoping I had misplaced it. Number. It had vanished. In that instant, an icy intuition ran down my spine. I had no proof in hand, but my gut pointed to one name. Eric. I pictured him sneaking it out, trading it for quick cash to satisfy some immediate urge. The suspicion lodged in my heart like a blade. Sitting in the room that had been turned into a storage closet, staring at the void where the watch had been, I saw more clearly than ever. Linda and Eric weren't merely indifferent. They had treated my absence as a chance to seize everything. The wound in my chest throbbed, but the real pain lay deeper. It turned out that for years I hadn't been nurturing a family, but people who only spent, indulged, and took. When I nearly died, they didn't cry, didn't tremble. They threw a party. When I left the last keepsake from my father, they treated it like barter. I sat there a long time, my hand trembling as it touched the empty spot on the shelf. In that moment, I knew I had hit bottom. Nothing left to hope for, nothing left to save. But at the same time, another spark lit. If they think I will keep silent, keep gritting my teeth and bearing it like the past 40 years, then this time they are wrong. I drew a deep breath. Outside the window, the afternoon sun was slipping over the neighbor's roof. That light made me recall my father's words, "Do not let your time be taken for nothing." And I told myself, from today on, the time I have left will no longer be for Linda and Eric. That evening I sat alone in my study, staring at the empty spot on the glass shelf. The warm yellow desk lamp cast a long shadow on the wall. The question of the Rolex drilled into my head like an auger. I could not pretend I had seen nothing. When Linda walked past, I called out, "Linda, have you seen my father's watch?" "The Rolex I keep on the shelf." She stopped, startled for a moment, then quickly grew composed. "Oh, I must have put it somewhere with the boxes I was organizing. I'll look later." I looked straight into her eyes. "I already searched. It's not here anymore." Before I could say more, Eric came in from the living room, a beer can in hand, voice flat. "Dad, you're misremembering. You always misplace things. Maybe you took it for repairs and forgot." My fingers tightened on the chair arm. That watch has never left this room. Eric's eyes darted away. He took a sip of beer, the other hand scratching his neck, strangely uneasy. Years in construction had taught me to read the eyes of a liar. "I don't know anything," he muttered, avoiding my gaze. Linda immediately cut in, voice rising. Enough, Harold. It's just an old watch. Don't make a fuss. Our son has enough pressure. Stop suspecting him. I went numb. To me, it was my father's last keepsake. To them, it was just an old thing to be discarded. Linda's coldness, together with Eric's evasion, drove the blade deeper. I said nothing more. I just looked at the two of them, my heart like ice. In their eyes, truth did not matter. Only covering up to preserve the facade of family did. When they left, I sat down and opened the safe. The blue-covered will lay there, the print clear. The house, the retirement accounts, the 401k, the stocks, all left to Linda and Eric. I stared at the line, to my beloved wife, to my son, and felt it was absurd. Beloved, the wife who treated my father's keepsake as less valuable than the calm of this counterfeit family. Son, the boy who had just lied to my face. I folded the papers, feeling as if I were holding a death sentence for my own dignity. No, I could not let the legacy of my life fall into their hands. The next morning, I opened my laptop and searched Austin Estate Attorney. The first prominent name, Jonathan Hale and Associates. I called. The receptionist's voice was professional. Mr. Whitman, we can schedule you for Tuesday at 9 a.m. Would that day work for you? I'll come, I replied briefly. The secretary on the other end confirmed the appointment. Before hanging up, Jonathan Hale's voice came steady and firm. Mr. Whitman, to make sure no one can question your decision, I'll contact and invite the surgeon who operated on you to confirm your mental clarity. On Tuesday, we'll finalize everything. Before I turned off the phone, my eyes swept the desk again. A small slip of paper stuck out from the stack Eric had left behind. I pulled it out, a receipt from a pawn shop on East Riverside, for $2,500. It didn't specify the item, but a chill ran through me. I have nothing in hand to prove it, I whispered, but my instinct points to one name. Eric. I couldn't sit still. That afternoon, I drove to the address on the receipt. A small pawn shop, flickering neon, a worn sign. When I stepped inside, the air reeked of rusty metal and sweat. The owner, a bearded man, gave me a sidelong glance. What can I do for you? I set the receipt on the counter. I want to know what was traded on this ticket. He frowned, tapped a few keys on an old computer. Then he opened a drawer and pulled out a wooden box. When the lid flipped open, my heart seized. My father's Rolex lay right there, its steel shining cold under the yellow light. Tall young guy, brown hair, about 35 years old. Paperwork under the name Eric Whitman. He's the one who pawned it last week, the owner said. The whole world seemed to collapse around me. No more suspicion, no more hunch. The naked truth lay before my eyes. My son had sold out the only keepsake my father left me for a handful of cash. I picked up the receipt, my hands shaking, my voice hoarse. Keep it here. I'll be back before long. When I stepped out, the late Austin's sun slashed my face like a cold blade. This pain could no longer be excused. Linda had covered it up. Eric had lied. Everything was now clear. I drove straight home, opened the safe, and placed the receipt right next to the old will. I still have nothing in hand to take justice back, I whispered, but this proof is enough for me to... I know. Everything must change. On Tuesday, I would begin again. Tuesday came overcast in Austin. Gray clouds spread thick like a sign of a serious day. I pulled on an old sweater, clutched the file tight, and stepped into the glass high-rise that housed Jonathan Hale and Associates. The reception gleamed. The secretary smiled professionally. Mr. Harold Whitman. Mr. Hale is expecting you. The door opened. I walked into a walnut-paneled room flooded with light from a large window over downtown Austin. Behind an oak desk, Jonathan Hale stood. He was in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, clear, steady eyes. He offered his hand. A pleasure to meet you, Harold. I've reviewed the details my secretary sent over. Today you want to discuss changing your will? I nodded and set the file on the desk. I want a fresh start. All assets, the house, the retirement funds, the stocks, will no longer go to the family. I want everything transferred to a heart disease charity. I'll retain the right to reside and a monthly stipend for life. Hale raised an eyebrow, but wasn't surprised. He asked carefully, "With a decision this big, you're certain you've thought it through?" Not acting impulsively over a temporary conflict, I looked him straight in the eye. I was clinically dead for 47 seconds. 2 weeks in the hospital, not a single call, not a single message. On the day of discharge, my son told me to call a taxi. My wife said to stay another month because the house is quieter without me. If that isn't clear enough, then nothing else has meaning. Hale was silent for a moment, then flipped through the documents I brought. He asked, "And the house in Austin, did you buy it after marriage or before?" I answered firmly, "It's inherited from my father. I received it before I married Linda. The papers are in my name." Only Hale's eyes brightened. His voice grew decisive. "Then it's clearly separate property under Texas law. Mrs. Linda has no ownership rights, and when we place it into a charitable remainder trust, everything becomes even more secure. You'll live there for life, and afterward it will all pass to the American Heart Foundation. Your family won't be able to touch it." I nodded, feeling boulders lift from my chest. As he drafted the papers, the door opened, and a woman in a white coat entered. Dr. Carter, the very surgeon who operated on me. Hale explained, "I invited the doctor as a medical witness to confirm you're fully lucid. Later, no one can claim incapacity to challenge this." Dr. Carter smiled and shook my hand. "Mr. Harold is completely alert. Cardiac recovery is going well, and his memory and cognition are unimpaired. I'll sign this confirmation." An hour later, before 2 witnesses and a notary, I signed. The pen skating across the page felt like cutting the chains I had dragged for 40 years. Hale handed me a stamped copy. "That's it. From now on, you can rest easy. No one is allowed to change what you've signed." I gripped the papers and exhaled in relief. Only one thought filled my mind. Linda and Eric would never imagine that their comfortable life had just been erased with a few strokes of ink. When I stepped out of the building, the sky was still gray, but inside me, a streak of light flashed. Freedom. Only a few days after signing the new will, I began to feel the air at home shift. Linda grew different. Dinner was set out on the table, her voice softer, but her eyes glinted with calculation. Eric stopped tossing beer cans around, but his awkward gestures made it all the more obvious he was hiding something. One late afternoon, while fetching the paper at the door, I overheard Mrs. Henderson, the neighbor, murmuring to a friend, "No longer lucid, might be losing it after the surgery." Her eyes flicked toward me, full of pity and curiosity. My heart twinged. Clearly someone in the house had sown the rumor. That evening, when I walked into the kitchen, I saw a stack of documents Linda had left on the table. I slid them out and read. My blood froze. A petition for legal guardianship, listing Linda and Eric, filed with the Travis County Court. It read, "Mr. Harold Whitman, 69 years old, shows signs of cognitive decline after heart surgery and is easily exploited. We request that the court grant authority over assets and medical decisions to the wife and son." I dropped into a chair, hands shaking with anger. Barely a week after I had transferred everything out, they aimed to brand me incompetent to seize control. I called Linda and Eric into the living room. "What is this?" I set the guardianship petition on the table. Linda stayed composed. "Harold, I only want what's best for you. After surgery, your memory isn't what it was. If we leave it to outsiders, lawyers, charities, you'll lose everything." "I want the law to protect you," Eric cut in, voice hard. "You're being led around, Dad. Can't you see? They're using you to pry out money. We're your real family. We should have the right to decide for you." I looked straight into his eyes. Rage rose to my throat. Real family? When I lay on the table with my heart stopped for nearly a minute, Where was this real family? When I texted for a ride home, they told me to call a taxi. When I returned, my father's Rolex had vanished, and all I heard were evasions. And now they wanted the law to declare me unfit. You're doing this because you fear losing what was never yours, I said, each word weighed. Linda tried to keep a virtuous face. You're misunderstanding everything. We love you. We want to protect you. I laughed thinly, bitterness in my voice. Protect me? By stripping my dignity and my right to decide? The room fell into silence. Eric turned away from my gaze. Linda pressed her lips together, but her unfocused eyes showed that they knew I had seen through it all. That night, I took the file to Jonathan Hale's office. He read the petition and nodded. Exactly as I expected. They would try this route, but don't worry. We already have Dr. Carter's medical confirmation. You are fully lucid. I'll draft the response immediately. If necessary, we'll take it to court. This move of theirs will backfire. I gripped Hale's hand, feeling for the first time that I was no longer alone. Back home, I stood before the mirror, looking at the long scar down my chest. It was no longer just a life-saving incision, but a sign reminding me it was time to fight. Linda and Eric had drawn the line. If they wanted to brand me incompetent, then I would show the whole world my clarity. That morning, I sat in Jonathan Hale's office. On the desk was the stack of filings he had just prepared to submit to the court to oppose Linda and Eric's guardianship petition. Dr. Carter's letter sat on the very first page, its wording sharp as a blade. Patient Harold Whitman is completely lucid, fully aware, with no signs of cognitive decline following cardiac surgery. With this, Hale said, the court will dismiss it immediately. But I think you don't just want to win on paper, do you? I nodded. No, I want them to face the truth, not only in court, but before the community. Hale smiled and handed me a business card. Rebecca Mills, Media Coordinator, American Heart Foundation. She specializes in handling media for cases like yours. Let your story be more than a family lawsuit. Let it be a wake-up call for society. That afternoon, I met Rebecca in a bright office, the walls lined with Heart Awareness Month posters. She was a woman around 35, quick-eyed and sure-voiced. After hearing everything from the text asking to be picked up, to the missing Rolex, to the guardianship petition, she nodded, her tone resolute. Mr. Harold, this is a powerful story. A father abandoned by his family after heart surgery, then targeted by his own wife and son to seize his assets. If you agree, we'll work with the press and television. Your story will not only raise awareness about heart disease, but also show the value of gratitude and honesty in families. I was silent for a moment. Going public meant there would be no way back. Linda and Eric would rage, the neighbors would talk, but perhaps that was the light I needed. I agree. 3 days later, I sat under bright lights in the studio of the local news channel. The anchor, David Martinez, looked at me over his glasses, eyes both sympathetic and sharp. Mr. Whitman, he began, can you share what happened after your recent heart surgery? I drew a deep breath and looked straight into the camera. I was dead for 47 seconds, and when I came back, I discovered something more painful than death. My family did not want me alive. When I asked them to pick me up, my son told me to call a taxi because he was watching TV. My wife texted that the house was quieter without me. After that, they filed for guardianship, claiming I was incompetent so they could seize all of my assets. The studio fell silent. David nodded and asked, "So what did you do?" I changed my will. All my assets, including this house, my retirement funds, and my stocks, will be transferred to the American Heart Foundation. I want them to serve people who truly value life instead of those who only see me as a walking credit card. When the interview ended, I stepped into the hallway, my heart pounding. Rebecca caught up and laid a hand lightly on my shoulder. You just did the bravest thing of your life. Tonight, thousands will hear the truth. That is exactly what happened. At 6 p.m., the broadcast aired. Footage of my house appeared on screen, and the announcer's voice rang out. An Austin resident has sparked a stir by deciding to donate all his assets after being abandoned by his family following heart surgery. Images of me in the studio, recounting Linda and Eric's heartless messages, went out across the city. At home, Linda and Eric were surely frozen in front of the screen. As for me, for the first time in years, my chest felt light. No more hiding, no more swallowing it. The truth had been laid bare. In the Austin living room, Linda sat on the sofa, a fashion magazine still open on her lap. Eric lounged in the armchair, a game controller in hand, eyes fixed on the screen. Loud game music mixed with the smell of cold pizza on the table. Boring, nothing ever happens in this city, Eric muttered, fingers tapping the buttons. Linda answered with a sigh. At least. No old man is nagging all day. But as the announcer's voice rose from the TV, both looked up. An Austin resident has shocked the city by deciding to donate all his assets to the American Heart Foundation after being abandoned by his own family during his heart surgery. The image of the house appeared, the very house they were sitting in. White, gray-tiled roof, a large oak by the door. Unmistakable. Eric dropped the controller, his face drained. "Mom, that's our house." Linda went rigid, the magazine sliding from her hands. On the screen, Harold's face filled the frame, his voice steady. "When I asked them to pick me up, my son told me to call a taxi because he was watching TV. My wife texted that the house was quieter without me. After that, they filed for guardianship, saying I was incompetent to take all my assets." "Oh my God," Linda whispered, clutching her head. He told it all." Eric jumped up, snapping. "He's crazy. Doing this is parading us in front of the entire city." On the screen, Harold finished with a statement like a final cut. "I changed my will. All my assets will serve those who cherish life, not those who treat me like a walking wallet." The room sank into a thick silence. Only the wind hissed at the window. Linda, trembling, grabbed her phone and dialed. "Mr. Whitman!" "Harold! Call me back immediately. This is madness. Do you hear me?" No answer. Eric snatched the phone and dialed his father's number. The first time, it rang with no pickup. The second, it went straight to voicemail. "Dad, it's me, Eric. You have to stop this right now. Don't think I'll let you do it. I'm your son. You owe me that." No reply. They called again and again. By the 10th call, the phone returned only a cold, busy tone. On the other end, Harold had turned it off. They stared at each other, stunned. Outside, the world had begun to buzz. Online, the segment was shared nonstop. Neighbors, friends, and former colleagues all saw it. Comments flooded with words like ungrateful, cold-blooded, and greedy. Linda burst into tears, mascara streaking her cheeks. "What will people think of me now? They'll call me a monster." Eric growled, kicking an empty beer can across the floor. "No, I won't let him destroy our lives like this. I'll make him revoke that will. He's my father. He doesn't have the right." But the sentence died, because deep down, Eric knew. His father had every right, and for the first time he felt the safety he had always taken for granted shatter piece by piece. The whole house turned into a living nightmare as the TV screen revealed the truth to thousands of eyes. The next morning, Austin's sky was crystal clear. I pulled up in front of the house I had lived in for more than 40 years. The living room window was lit early. I knew Linda and Eric had been up all night, waiting for me to come home so they could explain. The key turned in the lock. The door swung open. Immediately, they rushed to block the entry. Linda's eyes were red, Eric's face tight, his voice harsh. "Dad!" "What kind of madness is this? You're destroying this family." I calmly took off my coat and hung it on the hook. My tone was even but icy. "Family?" When I lay on the operating table, at the moment the heart stopped, there was no family beside me. When I texted asking to be picked up, one told me to call a taxi. The other told me to stay another month because the house is quieter. Is that what you call family? Linda covered her face, crying, Harold, I didn't mean it. It was just something said in anger. We've been married 40 years. You can't let a couple of texts. I cut her off, my voice hard. Not a couple of texts. The truth. The truth is that to you and to our son, I'm nothing but an ATM. And when I nearly died, the only thing you felt was relief. Eric stepped forward and slammed a hand on the table. You can't do this. I'm your son. This house is mine too. I looked straight at him, my eyes like steel. Is it? Have you ever paid an electric bill, a mortgage payment, or even a single dollar to fix the roof? You dump beer and pile trash in this living room and dare to call it your house? Eric faltered, his eyes darting. Linda hurried to interject. Harold, calm down. We'll change. We'll start over. I set the morning paper on the table, my voice dry. There is no more chance. My ultimatum is clear. You have exactly 24 hours to leave this house. After that, I will change the locks. Linda stared, her face drained. You can't do that. This is my house, too. I turned away, my tone flat as ice. This house is my separate inherited property and has been placed into a charitable remainder trust. Neither of you has any further right to reside here. I worked a lifetime to keep it. If you want to stay, ask the court. See whether your guardianship petition still means anything after I made the truth public. Eric's face flushed red, and he shouted, You're so cruel, Dad. You'll die alone. I turned back, stared at him, and said slowly, Better to die alone than to live beside people who killed me in silence. The room sank into a thick, heavy silence. Linda trembled and sat down. Eric stood rigid, lips quivering without a word. I walked straight into the kitchen, poured a cup of coffee, and sat at the table, as if no one else were in the house. Before I opened the morning paper, I added one sentence, firm and final. Exactly at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, I want to see you both gone. Not 1 second late. The next morning, I got up early as I had for years. I brewed a pot of black coffee, pulled a chair onto the porch, and sat with the morning paper on my lap. Clattering noises rose from inside, the rustle of cardboard boxes, cupboard doors slamming, Eric's heavy footsteps pacing. Through the living room window, I saw Linda staggering with a box of dishes, her eyes swollen from crying. Eric dragged out piles of old electronics, computers, and snarled cords. He snapped, With this much stuff, how are we supposed to make it in time? Linda choked up. If your father would just soften a little, we wouldn't be in this mess. I heard every word but didn't react. The cup in my hand kept steaming. The bitter scent worked down my throat like a dose of clarity. By noon, the commotion had drawn the neighbors' attention. Mrs. Henderson crossed from the house opposite with a grocery bag, her eyes a mix of curiosity and pity. Harold, is everything all right? She asked, glancing at the high stack of boxes on the lawn. I gave a calm smile. All right, just a few changes in the family. But I knew she had watched last night's news. The whole neighborhood knew, and her eyes weren't just curious. They were a silent confirmation that Linda and Eric were exactly the people the city was condemning. In the afternoon, Eric began to flare up. He shoved boxes into the yard, sweat pouring, voice full of challenge. I'm not going anywhere. This is my house. I folded the paper and looked straight at him. At 8 o'clock tonight, if you're still here, the police will come and take you out. Eric, this time I'm not bluffing. Rage flashed in his eyes, then ebbed. He knew I meant it. Linda sank onto the steps, hair in tangles, voice hoarse. Harold, do you remember the day we moved into this house? Eric was tiny. We hung new curtains, bought an oak dining table. I can't believe it's ending like this. I looked toward the fence where the afternoon sun threw long shadows. My voice was steady, without a tremor. You chose the ending, Linda. Not me. I'm only giving back exactly what I was given. By evening, 2 cars packed to the brim stood in the driveway. Linda tried to wedge the last suitcase into the trunk, tears streaming. Eric slammed the trunk, eyes bloodshot. "You'll regret this," he shouted. I stood on the porch with a cup of coffee gone cold and answered evenly, "I've regretted things for 40 years. Today, for the first time, I feel light." At exactly 8 o'clock, the two cars rolled off the quiet street. Their red taillights faded at the end of the block. The house fell into silence, but it was the silence I had longed for over so many years, the silence of freedom. For the first time in 40 years, the house was truly empty. No clatter of beer cans, no TV blaring all night, no nagging words. Only the wind slipping through the porch and sparrows chattering in the morning. I sat in my study, my eyes resting on the glass shelf. There, my father's Rolex sat back in place. A few days earlier, I had quietly gone to the pawn shop on East Riverside and redeemed it for exactly the amount printed on the receipt Eric had left behind. The shop owner confirmed without a flicker of doubt. A brown-haired young man around 30 brought this in. I remember because he said it was an inheritance now. As the silver steel glinted in the morning light, I no longer felt anger. Instead, I felt relief, because at last, the truth had proof. More importantly, I had reclaimed the only keepsake from my father, a confirmation that I would never again let anyone touch my self-respect. The room was so quiet, I could hear the steady tick of the Rolex, like a new heartbeat, firm and sure. In the days that followed, I opened the folders I had stored away for years. Faded travel brochures, the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, the snow-capped Rockies. For so many years, I had folded them up and put them in a drawer to take care of the family. Now, nothing was holding me back. In March, I slung on a backpack and headed out. First stop, Big Bend National Park in West Texas. On a cliff overlooking the Rio Grande, with wind scouring my face, I breathed deep, my chest full of dry, clear air. The heart that had stopped for 47 seconds now beat steady and strong. By the campfire, I met Tom, a retired teacher from Oklahoma, and Sarah, a widow from Denver. They invited me to join a hiking group of people who had lost something, but found life in nature. Awkwardly, I said yes, and I didn't know then that it would be the start of a whole new chapter. Sarah taught me how to hold a DSLR and set the aperture to catch sunrise on the Chisos Peaks. Tom told me about 40 years of teaching, then burst out laughing when I admitted I'd never had friends outside construction sites. Each trip opened a new horizon. Colorado in April, snow melting, wildflowers stretching across a valley. I captured the mountains reflected in Crystal Lake, a photo that the Hart Foundation later printed in a fundraising bulletin. In May, I went to Utah to see Arches National Park, where sunset turned the sandstone into a sea of fire. One afternoon, Dr. Carter called. Her voice was warm. "Mr. Harold, seeing you like this, I have to say, I've never seen a patient recover so fast. Not just physically, your spirit has changed." I laughed. Maybe because I removed the biggest tumor of my life, the falsehood in my family. Meanwhile, Rebecca from the American Heart Foundation kept in touch. She wanted me to share my story at seminars, encouraging heart patients to find meaning again. The invitation moved me. From someone abandoned, I would now be a voice helping hundreds find faith. On an early summer evening, I came back to Austin and sat in a small cafe by the Colorado River. The warm light cast on my face in the window. I realized that the wrinkles, the scar on my chest, the gray hair, none of it was a record of collapse anymore, but proof that I had survived and was truly living. For the first time in years, I smiled. Not a strained smile for family, but my own. 6 months after signing the new will, my life had changed more than I ever imagined. From a 69-year-old man fading in a chaotic house, I had become a vigorous man, roaming the American West with a camera and a reborn heart. The trips kept bringing me new people. I learned to pitch a tent in desert wind, to cook on a camp stove, and to open up in conversations around a fire. I never thought at my age I would see dawn from Bryce Canyon's rim or hear eagles surge over the Rockies. One July afternoon, I came back to Austin for a short rest. In the familiar little cafe near the river, as I flipped through prints from Utah, a familiar figure appeared. Eric. He no longer wore a wrinkled t-shirt with a beer can in hand. Instead, a tucked-in button-down, neatly cut hair. His eyes still held some hesitation, but something was different. A maturity I'd never seen before. "Dad," he said softly, without the insolent edge of the past. I nodded and gestured for him to sit. We were quiet for a while. Finally, he began. "I found a job, a design firm downtown. The pay isn't much, but I earned it myself. I also rented a small apartment, paying my own way, buying my own things. No more leaning on Mom or on you." I watched in silence. The way he spoke, the way he set his phone on the table, no hurried hiding, no twitchy eyes. "I didn't come to ask for anything," he went on. "I just want you to know. I understand now. I understand how much you sacrificed, how I betrayed your trust. Especially," his eyes flicked to the Rolex on my wrist. "When I remember that." I set my hand over the watch and nodded slightly. "At least you dare to say it out loud." Eric lowered his head. "I know you won't forgive me right away. I'm not asking you to change the will. I'm only asking for a chance, to prove I'm really different. Maybe, just to have coffee with you sometimes." Like today, a long quiet opened in me. The Rolex ticked, as if to remind me that everything has its time. I spoke slowly. "Eric, trust isn't bought with words, but with actions. I won't open my house to you anymore, but I'll leave a seat open at this cafe. If you want to prove it, start with meetings like this." He looked up, eyes shining. "I understand. And thank you for giving me a second chance." We sat a while longer, talking about his new job, the places I'd been, and the Colorado mountain photo he couldn't stop staring at. For the first time in years, a conversation between father and son wasn't about money, blame, or demands, but about the truth. When Eric stood to leave, he held out his hand. I took it. The handshake felt unfamiliar, no longer limp, but firm, like a grown man's. I watched him walk out the door, and a strange feeling stirred in me, not full trust, but a seed of hope. Stepping outside, I looked up at Austin's afternoon sky, clear and bright. The Rolex ticked on my wrist. This time, its rhythm didn't only recall the past. It whispered about the future, that from ashes, new life can still take root. And I smiled, for the first time as a free father, living for myself, yet open enough to leave a path home for my son if he truly changes. For 40 years I lived for others, only to be cast aside in the very house I built. But standing once on the edge between life and death taught me to live for myself, and to be strong enough to offer a chance to those who truly want to change. My story ends here, but the message remains. Never underestimate the worth of someone who has sacrificed an entire life for family. If this journey meant something to you, please subscribe, share the video, and tell me where you're listening from in the comments. Your support is the motivation that helps me keep telling the stories no one else dares to speak.